Preachers Talking Preaching. This is Dale Jenkins, and this is our second episode, an attempt at just bringing a guy on and talking to him a little bit about preaching and the kind of getting behind the sermon and looking kind of a little more in depth into how a preacher puts a sermon together, the reaction of it, and how they came about. And today I'm very happy to have a good friend of mine with me, Joseph Horton. Joseph preaches at the Winchester Church of Christ. And Joseph, I think that's about the only congregation you've really worked with.
That's it. Yes, sir. Yeah, we moved here in 2007, and I started as the youth minister and moved into the pulpit about 5 years ago. We've been here 13 years total, and it's the only place we've been in full-time ministry.
What's Winchester like?
Winchester is a small town in southern Middle Tennessee. It's about an hour and a half from Nashville, an hour and 15 minutes from Chattanooga. It's probably the size of, Lawrenceburg or Pulaski or Savannah. And I'm thinking of some other towns across the bottom of our state. But it's a pretty unique place in that we've got Tim's Ford Lake just to the north that brings in a lot of tourists and people who have lake homes who are from other places. And then up the mountain, we have Sewanee, the University of the South, which is just a 15 to 20-minute drive or so from where I sit. So it's kind of a diverse community overall, but a very scenic area of Tennessee, and we've just enjoyed living here.
And of course, your most famous resident, Phil Fulmer.
Phil Fulmer, yes, and Johnny Majors also hails from Franklin County as well. So.
But the church in that area is pretty healthy numbers-wise. It seems to be pretty strong, and the Winchester Church is doing a really good job from everything we can tell. And, of course, we're all in this same thing right now, trying to figure out what to do and how to bring folks back and things like that. You were talking in the sermon that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. You're talking a little bit about y'all's Wednesday evening plans that you have. So talk a little about that.
Yeah, well, we've been challenged, as everybody else has, about how we come back together in a way that's safe for everyone. And we've been meeting on Sunday mornings for, since late May, we started back with precautions in place. And we are going to have a Wednesday night series starting tonight, 3 weeks with Lonnie Jones. He's talking about the Christian and mental illness. And then we're going to do 3 weeks with Kyle Butt, and he's talking about Christian evidences. We'll all be in the auditorium for that, except we do have a kids program from 4-year-olds to 5th graders who will be meeting elsewhere in the building. And those lessons, we're going to put those online as well on Thursday evenings after they're presented on Wednesdays for those who can't get out or are not comfortable getting out yet. So we don't expect as big of crowds as we've had in the past, for special series. But I hope we'll still have good participation. And I'm glad we're going to do this online element too, to catch some people that won't be with us in person.
Very neat. So we're calling this series Preachers Talking Preaching. And I kind of want to talk to you a little bit about your sermon from last Sunday, August the 9th. And I believe the title was Stopping Sin Before It Starts.
Yes.
And so what we do is we just have a few questions here. First of all, where did you get the idea for the sermon? I love the way you started the sermon. It was very upbeat and optimistic, but where did you get the idea for this?
Well, I think that I got the idea from a sermon I heard preached many years ago. In fact, I think I just watched a video of this sermon, and I better not say who was preaching because I might get it wrong. I actually don't remember, but exactly. But the theme of the sermon, or the topic or title, was the best time to get a divorce is before you get married. And
Yes.
It was a sermon about marriage and divorce and the seriousness of that covenant and making sure you enter into that relationship seriously. And when I was reading the text in James, I thought, that concept can be expanded to really include any sort of sinful lifestyle or behavior. The best time to stop doing those things is before you ever get started. So that's, I think, the origin of the way that I approached the text.
All right, very neat. So what spurred it on? You had the idea, then what happened after that?
Well, this is one of the few sermons that I have recycled. You know, I said earlier I've been preaching for about 5 years, and I really have not gone back very often at all to pull material and to preach it again, because I mean the big reason is 5 years is not that long ago, and some people might remember not the whole thing but certain sections of it. But also I've just sort of been opposed to doing that because I just thought it probably feels dated or stale or whatever. And I think there are certain ones that I wouldn't go back and preach again. I might not be, happy with the message or the way that I arranged the material. But this one, when I looked through it, I thought it's still, I still believe in the message, and I still am happy with the way that it's been arranged. And so I pulled it out because I think, it's a pretty timeless message. I pulled it out and thought this one is worth preaching again. And so, I worked back through it and took out some stuff, added some stuff, changed out some illustrations, and ended up with what I had on Sunday.
Very neat. So when I put a sermon together, inevitably I'll have 2 or maybe 3 sentences that are kind of pivotal sentences. And, I'll think this is an important sentence. I'll work hard and long in crafting that specific sentence. I want it to be pungent. I want it to have a punch and to make a point really strong. So I was wondering, as I listened to this sermon, what you thought your best point was. And I wrote one down. You had
Okay.
a line where you said, Joseph, much like the one you're looking at, was very handsome in form and appearance. Is that your favorite line in the sermon? What was your best point?
That's my absolute favorite line, that one right there, which kind of came to me in the moment. I don't think that I'm all that skillful with humor. I think humor is very difficult from the pulpit. Some people are very skilled at it. I am very uneven. I'll say things that I think are going to be really funny and they just completely fall flat. That actually got a lot of laughs on Sunday. So, but my main point of the sermon was that the best time to stop sin is before it starts, at the moment of temptation. If you don't want to go down this path that James so vividly illustrates, then at the moment of temptation, we need to recognize that's not a trip we want to take and resist the devil. So yes. I, of course, hope that idea was communicated loud and clear, and I hope that was the best point of the sermon, because it was the point of the sermon. It was my main point. But I also hope that people took away from the sermon that, as James says, temptation doesn't come from God. He is not himself tempted, and he himself tempts no one. James says that it comes from within, and we've got to take responsibility for those desires before we can resist them. So I hope that that was taken away, as an important point as well.
So you had a line, I wrote down a couple. You had this line I really liked. You said, to keep from arriving at a terrible destination, don't take the first step. So just a restating of the theme and the title of the sermon, but stated, I thought, in a really powerful and practical way. And then you had a line that I thought that you got the point across really well, but I don't know that your metaphor held up. You said, okay. Once you start, it's very difficult to get off the on-ramp.
Okay. Yeah, I tried to say once you go up the on-ramp, it's difficult to get off the interstate. That's what I was trying to say. Sometimes those little phrases I'll get jumbled up.
The point was right. I mean, I knew exactly what you meant as soon as you
Yeah,
said it, but I thought, wait.
that's right.
Then I started writing it down. I thought, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense.
That doesn't make any sense.
But
Yeah,
it was good. It made the point really well. So,
good.
if you are able to preach this sermon again, and it sounds like when you probably will, what do you think you do different? Do you, looking back, do you think, oh, you might even do that, but I know I always think mine is usually 5 minutes after the invitation song. I think, man, I wish I'd said this, or I wish I'd done that. What would you do different in your mind right now if you were to preach the sermon again?
I was pretty satisfied with this one. There are some when I sit down, I really beat myself up over, and I think that was way too long. You rambled, you didn't get to the point. I have to, when I'm up there preaching, remind myself, keep going. That's like a refrain that I'm telling myself in my head. Keep going. Don't get too hung up on this point or that one. I have the tendency to sort of go off on a tangent and stick around on a point for too long. But I thought this one overall was pretty succinct. I always think I can do a better job at the end. I really struggle with wrapping things up and offering a compelling invitation. That's something that with every sermon, I think there's room for improvement there. Really driving it home at the end and tying a bow on it, and as we do, uh, offering the invitation at the end.
I think a lot of us who preach put so much time and energy into the meat of the sermon that we miss that closing and how important that is.
Yes.
And we have that tag on stuff that we know we can say and that we say every week, many of us, and that ends up being the end. And it takes away, I think, some of the impact the sermon can have. I tend to agree with that. So,
yes.
All right. So, what was your reaction to the sermon?
What was the reaction of the listeners?
Yes.
Well, it was positive, and I got a couple texts about it that were encouraging to me, and one of them said, if we're not being challenged, then we're in trouble. If we're not thinking every day about being on guard against the schemes of the devil, then we're at greater risk of falling prey to his to him. Somebody reached out and said they liked when I said that being virtuous doesn't make you immune to giving in to temptation, but when we embrace Christ-like virtue and allow God to change us and renovate our hearts, it can make us more resistant. They thought that hit home, especially in the time of COVID, as we're thinking about disease and how to prevent that. That illustration connected with them. So overall, it was positive.
I think there are at least two dangers we face right now. One is kind of turning negative. We're ready for people to come back. Some haven't come back, and getting frustrated with why haven't they come back, and then we become negative and start only preaching at the people that aren't there for not being there. And that's kind of misguided, because the people that are there, why are we punishing them? Because we're upset at the people that aren't there. And then the other side of it, being all positive and being afraid to call out sin and sinfulness right now. And I think both of those are dangerous places for us to be. So
yes,
you handled it, I thought, especially in introduction, a sermon that is negative in its nature because it's talking about sin, but you handled it in a very positive way by talking. You started the sermon about the gospel and the good news of the gospel. I appreciated that. You did a great job. So I want to thank you for it. Anything you want to toss in before we close today?
Well, you talked about how these are difficult times, and I have been discouraged myself on occasion. It's just hard to preach to a room. It was hard to preach to a camera for so long, and now it's hard to preach to a room that's half full, where people are not shaking hands and hugging, where there's not the warm fellowship, or at least the expression of it, that we experienced in the past. And so I think this is just a time when we've got to put our heads down and do the work and stay the course and stick
Amen.
with it. And things I think are going to get better. And we need to be as understanding with each other as we can, and as encouraging as we can with each other, because everybody's feeling extra tense through these times.
Amen.
And I've appreciated all the encouragement that I've gotten. It's helped to sustain me through it from my own people,
Yeah, there have been some people that really have stepped up their encouragement, because I think they understand that this could be a discouraging time. Well, man, thank you. Great to be with you today. Keep up the good work. And
Thank you, Dale.
Hope we'll see you soon. We'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Bye.